Emily Dickinson, one of the greatest poets of all time and one of the shiniest minds that all of literature has to offer. But what are her 10 best poems? That question comes anytime you open up your big book of Emily Dickinson, and we have one reader's opinion here. This video, welcome Strip Cover Lit, this video will appear in 3 separate playlists here on the channel. Number 1 being the Emily Dickinson playlist, a playlist dedicated to the greatest poet of all time. Number 2 being the poetry discussion playlist, and number 3 being the Friday Reads playlist, where I take on different ideas from the world of literature. Today's article is titled The 10 Best Poems of Emily Dickinson, very straight and to the point, by Monica Cooper from classicalpoets.org. She opens the article thusly. Being presented with an Emily Dickinson poem is like getting a telegram from a strange planet, our own. There may not be any words you know, but she has an idiosyncratic way of putting words together and of leaving certain grammatical and syntactical conventions out. Also, if you're looking at a poem of hers in its raw state, you're more than likely to notice a magical texture, something like German or Milton, attributable to unexpected capital letters in the middle of clauses, with clauses and phrases set off with long dashes. The dashes add to the telegram effect. It's quite as if traces of untranslated Morse code have been left cryptically behind in the message. For people who love Emily Dickinson, these dashes and capitals and ellipses are part of the delight. If you are not already one of these people, and some never will be, at least don't let such accidentals scare you or bother you too much. They are grace notes to the music, and should you come to the love of poetry of Emily Dickinson, you will not want to do without them. Anyone who has read Emily Dickinson, 1830 to 1866, in quantity and with intensity knows her words, poems, and images make homes in the mind ever after. These 10 poems, in no particular order, are not only the ones that I've apprehended in the shadows of mine, but they are 10 of the best. If you don't see your favorite Emily Dickinson poem here, feel free to add it in the comments below. That stands for this video as well. I would love to know your favorite Emily Dickinson poem, and if you have the gumption to put together a top 10, leave that in the comments below. Also in the comments, let me know if you want to see me put together my top 10 Emily Dickinson poems. I don't know if I would do it as a video or as a series, but let's get into things. Number 10, Safe in Their Alabaster Chambers, which reads as such. Safe in their alabaster chambers, untouched by morning and untouched by noon, sleep the meek members of the resurrection, rafter of satin and roof of stone. Grand go the years in the crescent above them. Worlds scoop their arcs and firmaments row. Diadems drop and doges surrender, soundless as dots on a disk of snow. This poem is often cited as being one of the best Emily Dickinson poems, but I personally have never liked it. I don't know what it is about this poem. It just does not catch my fancy. And if you read Emily Dickinson regularly, you will come across poems that you just don't like. You look at it in the canon of Emily Dickinson and you're confused. You don't really understand how it stands there. But one thing I've learned is that if you spend enough time with any Emily Dickinson poem, it will grow on you, and there will be something in there that you learn. There will be something in there that you learn about the poem, and it will grow in your esteem. The author says, the oddness and awfulness of death is a major fascination of Dickinson's. In the space between stanzas, this poem springs from a dainty and whimsical portrait of death into cosmic and extraterrestrial realms. The two halves of the poem, magical earth and supernatural whirlwind, work together beautifully, but the leap between them always takes my breath away. The diadems and doges dropping and surrendering recall the roaring majesty of the famous hymn with saints casting down their golden crowns around the glassy sea. Then the final line completely removes us from the known world. It has surreality of an image resolving into the blankness or whiteness of concept. The kind of thing that happens on the edge where thought and dream bleed together. Like many of Dickinson's poems, Safe in Their Alabaster Chambers is written in hymn book meter. You can sing it to the Morning Star tune for brightest and best of the sun's morning. Try it, and you're welcome. That is another thing that strikes me with a lot of Emily Dickinson poems. When you break from one stanza to the next, oftentimes there are great lapses of time. There are changes seemingly in point of view. It's just, these are things that are very hard to really grasp on a first read through. You have to read it, get some concept of what the poem is, get some concept of what the poem is about, and then different changes like that start to make a little more sense. Moving on, number 9, there's a certain slant of light, which reads as such. There's a certain slant of light winter afternoons that oppresses like the heft of cathedral tunes. Heavenly hurt it gives us, we can find no scar, but internal difference, where the meanings are. None may teach it any, 'tis the seal despair, an imperial affliction sent us of the air. When it comes, the landscape listens, shadows hold their breath. When it goes, 'tis like the distance on the look of death. Pretty clearly one of the top Emily Dickinson poems of all time. Maybe her best known opening line, there's a certain slant of light. The author says this about the piece. In this famous piece, Dickinson uses the vehicle of a slant of light to explore the inner experience of devastating revelation, internal paradigm shift. The use of the ongoing present throughout creates the sense that the world is shifting. Invisibly scarring, these events are a customary occurrence in her winter world. The slant of light, recurring afternoon by afternoon, habitually impresses its unique and terrible seal. Dickinson builds her poem of paradox blocks. Heavenly hurt, imperial affliction. She evokes a corrective extreme state of light, in which everything seems flawed. As later poet Jane Kenyon worded her observation of the New England winter sun phenomenon. Reading this poem, I always think of Bernini's sculpture St. Teresa in Ecstasy. The angel in the sculpture holds his dart at a menacing but heavenly slant. As basically with every Emily Dickinson poem, I think that there is an interpretation for this poem to be had where it is talking about death. There's a certain slant of light to the coming night, right? There's a certain slant of light that existence, the sun itself, gives us that will be foreboding enough to make us think about our own end. And probably that's why this poem has lived for so long. Probably that's why this poem will live forevermore. Number 8, the soul selects her own society, which reads as such. The soul selects her own society, then shuts the door to her divine majority, present no more. Unmoved, she notes the chariots pausing at her low gate. Unmoved, an emperor be kneeling upon her mat. I've known her from an ample nation. Choose one. Then close the valves of her attention like a stone. We come to the major interpretive crossroads in this poem with the word present. Is it a general imperative or an adjective describing the soul? Crossroads like this appear at various places in Dickinson's work. It's always worthwhile to stop, listen to each possibility and its ramifications, and then go back and test your choice after reading the rest of the poem. The Soul Selects Her Own Society is about the harsh and absolute mystery of elective, exclusive love. Though the soul selects it with arbitrary power so free that it is called by analogy divine. In the end, her own choice binds her in a state of petrification. The final lines unveil for us the terrifying side of choice and love. At some point, decisions become permanent, pass through the point of being changed. Even when elective love is actually divine, it is a tragic aspect. Jacob have I loved, but Esau have I hated. When the soul doing the electing is human and fallible, the risk is incalculable. Nevertheless, the wager is imperative. The number 7 poem is my favorite poem, not just of Emily Dickinson's, but of all time. I died for beauty, but was scarce. I often refer to this just as I died for beauty. I died for beauty, but was scarce, adjusted in the tomb. When one who died for truth was lain in an adjoining room, he questioned softly why I failed. For beauty, I replied, and I for truth. Themself are one, we brethren are, he said. And so, as kinsmen met a night, we talked between the rooms until the moss had reached our lips and covered up our names. Here is a poem full of the consolations of philosophy applied to the ancient terror that is death. In privileged academic settings, how privileged I had no way of knowing, I used to be involved in debates about the respective merits of philosophy and poetry, the relationship, identity, interchangeability of truth and beauty. Dickinson's speaker meets a fellow failure in an underworld where truth and beauty have been fully reconciled. And yet the dialogue, the great conversation, goes on. The democracy of the dead is a commonplace. Here, the poet gives us instead an aristocracy, a noble fellowship of death. Even the final silencing, a lapse into anonymity, at the poem's end does not fall like a curse from the kinsman, but like a natural peace, resigned and hope-filled sleep. So I think there's actually a little bit of, I have a difference from the writer here. I think that as opposed to being a failure, I think that these two have succeeded. They have paid the ultimate price for what it is that in which they believe. And the conversation does not go on until the moss had reached our lips. It stops and covered up our names. The anonymity note from the author here is true. And I think that's basically the entire point. The number 6 poem here, mine, by the right of the white election. Could be a bit of a different interpretation there. Mine, by the right of the white election. Mine, by the royal seal. Mine, by the sign in the scarlet prison bars cannot conceal. Mine, here, in vision and in veto. Mine, the grave's repeal. Titled, confirmed, delirious charter. Mine, long as ages steal. This is the first time I have seen this poem listed in this way. I have never seen this poem basically put on any list of Emily Dickinson poetry. So the author of this article is certainly well versed in Emily Dickinson. Dickinson treats elective love again. This time, the speaker exults in the joy of being elected. My lover is mine, and I am his. The bride in Solomon's canticle boasts. Dickinson here elaborates the cadenzas on the word mine. This is not the tiny minus, Sislaw Milos, overheard as a theme in feminine conversation, and covertly joined in celebrating. This is the length and height and depth and breadth of jubilant, triumphant mineness. White election, royal seal, scarlet prison, the phrases breathe religion and esoterica. It is an intimate and mystical Easter hymn that Dickinson alleluias in these lines. Pardon me. This and other of Dickinson's poems epitomize for me the white stone principle in poetry. Some great poems present the reader with a certain opacity, a secret code personal to the poet. We can't completely crack it. Rather, we understand it by an awakened sympathy, a likeness of the poet's secret to a secret within us. It's a matter of deep calling unto the deep. In the term white stone principle, I allude to Jesus' promise in Revelation. To him who overcomes, I will give a white stone with a name written on it, known only to the one who receives it. Um, this poem, in my opinion, not one of the 10 greatest, but every reader will have their own 10. And certainly, if this is something that is spoken to the author in the way that the author professes, then yeah, I can see why she would include it here. The depth and breadth of Emily Dickinson is such that anyone can open up that book and find something there for them. Number 5, to fill a gap. To fill a gap, insert the thing that caused it, block it up with other, and twin yawn the more. You cannot solder an abyss with air. So this is a poem that is, you'd be hard, you want to say wisdom, right? This is the wisdom of the author coming through in very few words. But it is something that I think we all intuit at times. To fill a gap, insert the thing that caused it. I think that this is something that we all yearn to do from time to time. You get out of a relationship, you want back in a relationship, you drop an addiction, you pick up another addiction, something like that. The author says, where there is too much, a Jewish proverb suggests, something is missing. And where something significant enough is missing, Dickinson tells us here, nothing but the thing that caused the gap will help. Superfluous nonsense is the symptom of a vacuum where some cornerstone once kept watch. Dickinson begins the poem, the perfect companion to this one, with the lines, the missing all prevented me from missing minor things. Sometimes the thing we need is not available to solder the abyss we face. Then the trick Dickinson spent her life mastering, much of her poetry exploring, is to learn how to live with the missing all, rather than try to fill the void with too much that will make it yawn the more. The number 4 poem on this list, so that's another poem that I've never seen on a top 10 list. Number 4 is as well. As the starved maelstrom laps the navies, as the starved maelstrom laps the navies, as the vulture teased, forces the broods in lonely valleys as the tiger eased. By but a crumb of blood fasts scarlet till he meets a man, dainty adorned with veins and tissues, and partakes his tongue. Cooled by the morsel for a moment, grows a fiercer thing, till he esteem his dates and cocoa a nutrition mean. I, of a finer famine, deem the supper dry, for but a berry of Domingo and a torrid eye. 872 is one of Dickinson's most ferocious and memorable poems on the subject of eating. The fasting-feasting dynamic is strong in this one. She begins by evoking the ravenous in nature, the maelstrom, the vulture, the tiger, then elaborates on the tiger's fastidious and terrible eating habits. In the last stanza, she closes the analogy opened in the first stanza. The poem's speaker herself is like a maelstrom, vulture, tiger, discontent with her supper after tasting something better and more suitable to her intense appetite. Here, Dickinson recasts the situation of to fill a gap. Once a tiger has tasted a crumb of blood, once a strong soul has tasted a berry of Domingo, the abyss within is recognized and demands more of what caused it. Even in closing her analogy, Dickinson speaks in riddles. Berry of Domingo and Torrid Eye are clearly stand-ins, symbols, kennings, for something she won't or can't name directly. Eyes and berries have roundness and shining in common, and the single I of the last word evokes a personal presence animated by hunger, desire, or wrath. The tiger from earlier in the poem is back, facing the speaker, and the question is open as to who will be eating whom. This poem is one that I have often found impenetrable. It is almost as if it is Emily Dickinson writing for William Blake. And the The intensity that the author here is referencing is one that I think is often lacking from Emily Dickinson. The intensity, perhaps, of William Blake, right? But this is a poem that, with the help of the author, I've gotten a deeper understanding. But it is one that still troubles me, and it is one that I think still stands out among Emily Dickinson as the sort of as a sort of bridge to different types of poetry. I think that this poem, if you were an Emily Dickinson lover, could be a bridge to a poet like William Blake. Uh, very, very intense. Very, I mean, darkness is no stranger in Emily Dickinson poetry, but intense darkness, I think, can be. Uh, I'm Seated is the only Emily Dickinson poem I know of that is as intense as that. Then we have the number 3 poem here, Summer Laid Her Simple Hat, which reads as such. Summer laid her simple hat on its boundless shelf. Unobserved, a ribbon slipped. Snatch it for yourself. Summer laid her supple glove in its sylvan drawer. Who, wheresoever or she wheresoever or was she, the demand of all. 1363 is a lesser known poem of Dickinson's and a personal favorite. The simple hat, the supple glove, the boundless shelf, and sylvan drawer hover in a scenelessness, an important concept in Dickinson criticism. They float airily, concrete, but unsupported, like items snatched at in a fall through the rabbit hole of time. Times are changing. From summer's time with its simple classic fashion to fall. Pardon me. Summer is peaceful and methodical in her annual ritual of leaving and divesting. She is going somewhere else, and we are staying, even as time carries us to where we may not want to go. This poem is less heavy than others on my list. Its touch is light, crisp, and one slightly wistful. It ends on a note of awe and mystery, with a question that is heard but not necessarily understood, and certainly not going to be answered for us. So it's another poem that I've never seen on any top 10 list, as is number 2. Water Makes Many Beds, which reads as such. Water makes many beds for those averse to sleep. Its awful chamber open stands, its curtain blandly sweep. Aberrant is the rest in undulating rooms, whose amplitude no end invades, whose axis never comes. In 1428, the poet examines the element of water, getting to its vertiginous, almost demonic quality. There are dragons in the waters, Scripture tells us, and water is exorcised before being blessed for use in the old Catholic baptism rite. The poem has the tone of nightmares. Fear of water is primal. Nature's house, as Dickinson suggests elsewhere, is haunted. The nouns beds, chambers, curtains, rooms evoke a complicated house swirled through by many waters, a life and death series of deathbeds. What I love in this poem is its sublime marriage of beauty and fear, bonded like hydrogen and oxygen in the essence of water. When nightmares are beautiful, we love to tell them and hold on to their memory. They give us a sense of the fearful and wondrous, the immense expanses of chaos that somehow exist within us. And finally, the number 1 poem on this list, A Word Made Flesh is Seldom. A word made flesh is seldom and tremblingly partook, nor then perhaps reported. But I have not mistook. Each one of us has tasted the ecstasies of stealth, the very food debated to our specific strength. A word that breathes distinctly has not the power to die. Cohesive as the spirit, it may expire if he, made flesh and dwelt among us, could condescension be. Like this consent of language, this loved philology. A Word Made Flesh represents, in my judgment, Dickinson's crowning achievement. It doesn't stand alone as such. Her poems make an interlocking sub-universe, of which this late lyric is the capstone. Lyric, I say, but the genre here may be better characterized as Thomistic hymn. We are back in the hymn book world where the total grandeur of Christian orthodoxy, and in the total grandeur of Christian orthodoxy, pardon me, Dickinson hits many wild notes in her various singings, but in this poem she simply pulls out the glorious stops of the liturgical organ and minds its measures. Once again, she writes of eating with ecstasies of stealth, the very food debated, our specific strength, recalling intentionally, specifically, biblical descriptions of the manna, which adapted itself to each hungry soul's taste. The word is the all. Once missing, now tremblingly partook, argue that Dickinson was far from orthodox and certainly no Catholic. She was nevertheless given Christian truth for this poem about discovering Christian truth. As the parable of the treasure hidden in the field implies, it can happen to anyone. No one can deny that Dickinson was a seeker, out with lanterns looking for ourselves. This poem is one more proof among thousands in the human story of the gospel truth that he who seeketh findeth. Emily Dickinson and religion. This is a very long and winding path. People conjecture that she was anything from devout Christian to atheist. I think that probably the answer is yes. She was all of these things. These poems that we have from her took place over the course of her lifespan. Not only that, but she did not really publish. There was only, I think, 5 poems that she published in her lifetime. And I doubt that we would consider any of them among her very best. So this is more, her poetry is more like a journal because it was not really meant for public consumption. Publication being the auction of the mind of man. That's something we get from Dickinson. The implications of her and religion, her with religion, her without religion, are something that the reader has to read in. And I think that maybe that's not by design, as these were not meant for publication. But I think that the effect thereof is maybe even more powerful because they were not meant to be read. These were more like a journal. These poems were basically her journal entries. Having them over the course of her life lets us into her struggles with the ideas of religion. And I think that that's powerful because what it does is it allows us to insert our own beliefs to them more readily than if they were public, right? Anyway, guys, those are 10 poems, the top 10 poems from one writer for Emily Dickinson. If you like or appreciate this sort of thing, hitting a like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. If you find yourself here by chance but not design, literature is the only thing I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week. And as always, I hope to have you back for the next one.